Towering above the roily waters of the Hauraki Gulf, the sight of Rangitoto Island is unmistakable. Wide slopes descend down to the sea in near perfect symmetry, whilst its jagged peaks betray the faint beginnings of a place born from incredible heat and fire. In stark contrast to the sprawling, swarming, and unruly concrete jungle of Auckland City, Rangitoto always appears cloaked in an unceasing veil of greenery and silence. Serene yet forlorn, intimately familiar yet somehow strange, it can be easy to assume that Auckland's enigmatic monga doesn't really have much of a story to tell at all. I will be the first to admit that for many years this is exactly what I thought. In all honesty, when I started the summer research project, I wasn't quite sure what I was going to find. But after many long days spent trawling through Auckland Council Library's Research North archives, endless hours coping the deepest recesses of papers past, and even an overnight stay on Rangitoto Island itself, I started to realize that despite Rangitoto being only a 25-minute ferry ride away from Auckland City, the island has endured and indeed defied nearly 2 centuries worth of efforts to exploit, domesticate, reshape, and inhabit its shores. The more I researched, the more I felt that indispensable trait for any would-be historian, nosiness, began to stir within me. Why is Rangitoto the only major island in the Hauraki Gulf today not to have a permanent resident population? Has this always been the case? What forms did previous attempts to settle Rangitoto take? And if these attempts were always unsuccessful, what is it about Rangitoto Island that has caused so many Aucklanders to keep trying? These were just some of the many questions which inspired the overarching themes and arguments of my final research project. However, for the purposes of this presentation and for a bit of fun, I thought I'd share my key findings just a little bit differently. And so I present to you today 5 things you probably didn't know about Rangitoto Island, but really should. Hopefully you find these stories just as surprising, entertaining, thought-provoking, and as riveting as I did for demonstrating why a reimagining of Rangitoto's place in our harbour is long overdue. The first thing you probably didn't know about Rangitoto Island was that before 1897, successfully reaching Rangitoto's summit often made front page news. While the idea of writing to the local paper today about your hike to the top is unlikely to attract much attention, prior to 1897, no track to the summit existed. This meant visitors were left with only one option: to cross the island's vast scoria fields, like the one shown, by foot. It quickly becomes apparent then why successfully reaching the summit was no easy feat and an achievement many Aucklanders were keen to crow about. And crow they did, particularly in papers like the New Zealand Herald, Auckland Star, and Daily Southern Cross. Elaborate stories retelling attempts to rescale Rangitoto soon became recurring features. Indeed, many of these accounts read more like a modern-day adventure saga. For example, this excerpt comes from an account published that was over 1,000 words long. Yet for all the danger this author dramatically details for us, it appears that it was actually women rather than men who actually made up a substantial portion of the hiking parties assembled. Moreover, despite having to complete the feat in full-length petticoats and blouses, it seems that many were triumphant in reaching the summit, often much to the surprise and chagrin of their male co-travellers. You might not also be aware that Rangitoto Island was once home to the largest scoria quarry in the Southern Hemisphere. Situated near Islington Bay, the Auckland Harbour Board Quarry covered nearly 60 acres of Rangitoto Island, and at its peak provided employment for up to 100 workers. As part of its mining operation, the quarry featured no fewer than 9 hand cranes, 2 wharves, like the one shown on the left, a stone crushing plant, and multiple trolley lines, like the one on the right, which delivered scoria material to barges at a rate of 200 tonnes every few hours. Due to the site's remote location, the Auckland Harbour Board also built an additional 50 huts surrounding the quarry to accommodate workers and their families, alongside a small library, several gardens, and even a Rangitoto Quarry school, which had 11 students on its roll by 1957. While many Auckland newspapers were keen to depict the quarry, which was one of the only places in the city to be unaffected by the 1918 influenza pandemic, as an island paradise, the reality was perhaps less idyllic. At Islington Bay Quarry alone, 6 quarry workers were seriously injured, most often with fractures to the skull, and a further 2 were killed after being crushed to death under falling debris. Indeed, it would be a string of hospitalizations alongside mounting public pressure over the environmental costs of mining, including allegations that the quarry would permanently disfigure Rangitoto, that eventually led to the quarry's closure in early 1930, just as the full effects of the Great Depression were beginning to be felt. Like many of the enterprising individuals and pioneering industries drawn to the island by its imagined economic lure, Auckland Harbour Board Quarry ultimately had its hopes of finding an Arcadian paradise of scoria and honey painfully dashed. However, well before Pākehā attempts to reshape Rangitoto, the island has a long history of Maori occupation and usage. Since their arrival on the Tāmaki Isthmus, Maori frequently harvested marine and land-based resources from the island. One of the most prized amongst these was the kaka bird, as its feathers could be used to weave impressive korowai, or cloaks, that could be traded with other tribes for items of prestige. According to oral histories of early Rangitoto preserved by Ngāti Pai Tāmaki, the island's abundant bird population was protected by the powerful Te Tini o Maru iwi chief Te Tereru, who viewed the island as his kahui kaka, or parrot sanctuary. Alongside bird hunting, fishing and oystering were 2 other economic activities that were conducted on the island, often harvested on a seasonal basis in camps like the one on the right by all 3 ropu, or groups, who claim mana whenua over Rangitoto. These 3 ropu include Ngāpui, a northern-based iwi, Ngāti Poa, descendants from Tainui canoe, and Ngāti Tai ki Tāmaki, whose ancestors include both Tainui and New Zealand's earliest inhabitants, known as Te Tini o Maru iwi. This clearly demonstrates that far from the assessment made by many early Pākehā arrivals that the landscape had been totally unexplored, the island had been used by generations of tangata Māori as a place of economic sustenance and livelihood. Many people are also probably not aware that between 1911 to 1937, Rangitoto Island was home to 3 thriving batch communities on its shores. At its peak, the island had more than 150 batches clustered near Islington Bay, Beacon End, where the island's lighthouse is located, and Rangitoto Wharf. Moreover, batch owners successfully lobbied the Rangitoto Island Domain Board to approve the construction of a swimming pool, children's playground, St John Medical Hut, dance hall, and even tennis courts too. While many of the island's batches are still seen from the shoreline today, after the Department of Lands, now the Department of Conservation, banned the construction of any new batches on the island, or the transfer of pre-existing batch titles in 1937, more than half of Rangitoto's interwar batches were torn down and burnt. As part of my summer research project, I was really privileged and got to spend a night at batch 114, which is the picture at the bottom, one of Rangitoto Island's 3 heritage batches that can be booked by the public. Nestled snugly amongst mature Pahurakawa trees looking out onto Islington Bay, staying at that preserved 1930s batch allowed me to really reconsider how the social and cultural legacy of these self-professed Rangitoto settlers continues to live on today. Finally, no history of Rangitoto is complete without acknowledging that over 340 prison labourers worked on Rangitoto Island. Between 1925 and 1935, these prisoners, originally from Mount Eden Prison, were regularly cycled on and off the island to work in a private scoria quarry for the next 10 years. It is worth noting that nearly all communal facilities found on Rangitoto Island today, Islington Bay Jetty, numerous coastal pathways, the island's road, shown on the right, dance hall, tennis courts, playground, swimming pool, to name but a few, had stonework laid or were located on parcels of land painstakingly levelled by prison work gangs. Indeed, Angela Woolnough estimates that the value of this unpaid work was equivalent to £25,000. That's $2.8 million in today's rates. I think one of the biggest difficulties I encountered when researching the island's convict past was the sheer absence of material able to be found on the island's prison work camps, let alone any prisoners' perspectives. However, this does not mean that a dissenting opinion did not exist. And in fact, I was very surprised to learn that at Rangitoto Island, it was the site of no less than 2 attempted prison escapes in the space of only 8 years. That was more than any other Auckland correctional facility at the time. The first and best recorded attempt to escape Rangitoto Island took place in the early hours of February 17th, 1926. 2 of the camp's prison labourers, William Wall and Samuel Bryder, 23 and 33 respectively, successfully broke the heavy security bolt on the outside of their door and left Rangitoto Island around 12:30 AM with the help of a stolen dinghy. It was not until the next morning was the 2 prisoners' disappearance noticed, prompting a frenzied attempt by local authorities to notify the mainland. Although Wall and Bryder's first night hiding out on Motuhui Island was uneventful, strong swells on the second day resulted in their dinghy being wrecked off Waiheke, which you can see on the map in red, and both men had to set off on foot, hiding by day and walking by night. Although previous police searches proved unsuccessful, a string of strange burglaries on Waiheke Island soon raised suspicions. Over the weekend, 2 residents reported that their batches had been broken into, and a variety of items ranging from blankets, binoculars, fishhooks, playing cards, tinned peaches to an automatic shotgun had been stolen. The hunt for the escaped fugitives was certainly on. After Waiheke locals Mr. and Mrs. Connell noticed that nearly 2 kgs of bacon, a box of shotgun cartridges, 1 onion and a tin of biscuits were missing from their homestead, several residents and the island's local constable banded together to chase down Wall and Ratteray, who were eventually arrested after a nearly 2-hour manhunt. Incredibly, when asked why they had attempted to escape, both men said that they were simply attempting to get back to Mount Eden prison, as they had grown tired of the 2 wardens who were always at loggerheads. Clearly unimpressed, the judge sentenced them both to an additional 2 years imprisonment with hard labour for being incorrigible rogues, and an additional 12 months imprisonment for stealing nearly £64, $6,800 in today's rates, worth of property. 8 years later, on May 17th, 2 more prisoners, this time Roy Taylor, 23, and James McAndrew, 25, similarly managed to break their hut security bolt and slip away in the early hours of the morning. Compared to Wall and Ratteray, both men were decidedly more successful in their efforts, rowing their dinghy all the way to Otahuhu before beaching it to walk inland following the Great South Road, as shown in blue. However, once again, it would be a string of burglaries which sealed the escapees' fate. After stealing Central Theatre moviegoers Dee Johnson's car and 3 litres of fuel at a Ramarama petrol station, Taylor and McAndrew were caught by police trying to flag down passing cars near Gordington. When questioned by police over the reasons for their attempt to escape, both men said that they were fed up with it all and hated their working conditions on Rangi. For this wild, unreasonable desire to get out of jail, the judge sentenced Taylor and McAndrew to an additional 6 months imprisonment, alongside another 3 months for converting Mr. Johnson's car. Although it is hard to say whether the second attempted prison escape was the final straw for the Department of Justice, a decision was made in late 1934 to discontinue all prison labour on Rangitoto Island. On March 2nd, 1935, the last work gang of 20 men quietly departed Rangitoto shores and returned to Mount Eden prison, marking the end of the island's colourful, yet ignored, convict past. To conclude, it is tempting for us to think that we already know everything there is to know about that island which lies in the middle of our harbour. Its site is so familiar. Yet when we delve beneath the surface, we begin to see another side of this iconic landmark emerge. Rangitoto is more than an inconsequential part of the waterfront scenery. Its history should challenge us to revise the ways we think about our city's places, and more importantly, what it means to be an Auckland today. And hopefully my presentation has brought you one step closer towards doing that.